The Aramaic Targums are critical to giving us a window into the world of John's word theology. We're not talking about this surface level stuff where critics like to swim. We're talking about deep down under theology, like where Mic Dundee lives. Not only do the hundreds of instances of the Aramaic word Memra, meaning word, give us a peek into John's brain, the actual Hebrew word Devar, which also means word, does also. The truth is that modern critical scholars who swim in the shallows want to insist that these ideas surrounding Jesus are some late progressive development that developed over time. They choose to ignore the deep Jewish roots and the Hebrew word Devar, meaning word, and the Aramaic term Memra, and how that could be applied to Jesus. These critics also want to insist that there's nothing to see here in the Hebrew word Devar and the Memra, because they say that it is just some circumlocution, meaning this is just a substitution, meaning we don't want to use the name, so we're using these as filler words. But you can see, if you do a deep dive, which we're about to do, that there's much more to the deep Jewish roots of John's Logos theology. And when we add in the very early creeds, the pre-Pauline apostolic creedal statements surrounding Jesus, you will see that when applying the Hebrew word Devar that is throughout the Old Testament and the Aramaic term Memra prevalent throughout the Targums, you will see this late progressive development idea gets blown out of the water like Mic Dundee fishing with explosives. Alright, let's get ready to go deep into the light on this. Before we do, I want to again recommend this book by John Ronning. It is very deep. If you want to go do a deep dive study into this Logos theology as it relates to the Aramaic Targums, I definitely recommend this book. And on the last video, we highlighted those that want to just say, oh, this is just some late philo philosophy, this Hellenistic Jewish philosophy, while ignoring both of these Hebrew word Devar and the Aramaic term Memra. Alright, let's dive into this. We have the Hebrew word Devar. We're probably not going to focus on that word too much. This video is primarily going to be on the Memra. And here's the lettering there. You also have variations memory. And if you're looking, you can see a very interesting comparison in the Syriac. It looks very similar, just stretched out a little bit. And here are some examples of how the Memra, the word, is used in the Aramaic Targums. It is read this way, and it means the Memra of the Lord, and it also means the word of the Lord, the word of Adonai, or the word of Yahweh, blessed be the name. We also have the Hebrew word Devar that is used in the Old Covenant scriptures over 240 times. And here are a couple examples of how it is used. We have Genesis 38, the Memra, and they heard the voice of the Memra, the word of Adonai Elohim. And what was it doing? The word was walking in the garden.
This is God as man in the Old Testament, and he's referred to as the word of the Lord.
And here's an example from Genesis 15:1 of the Hebrew word Devar. We have the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision. Imagine that. We have words that come to people in visual senses. We also know from 1 Samuel 3:10 that the word stands.
Look at what it says in verse 10. We'll go back to verse 10. The Lord came and stood. Okay, this is the language of embodiment. This is the language. This is anthropomorphic language. This is the language of a supernatural being, God, being embodied, because this is posture. If there's no visual appearance of Yahweh as a man in the room, how would you know that he's standing? You wouldn't.
We have a word, a standing word. We also know from Jeremiah 1:9 that this word reaches out his hand and touches.
Okay, you get to verse 9. The Lord, Yahweh, again, divine name, put out his hand and touched Jeremiah's mouth. Okay, now we've gone from embodiment to a tactile experience. And God as man, as this embodied being, is referred to as the word of the Lord.
All right, let's get into the meat of the presentation. We have Genesis 1:1. From the beginning, with wisdom, who was there? It was the Memra, the word of the Lord. What did the word do? It created. And this is directly related to John 1:1, where we have, in the beginning was the word, the very first opening of John 1:1. And it puts the Memra, the word of the Lord, at creation. And we know from Psalm 33:6 that as this is direct, all three are directly tied by the word. And we know, what do we learn from this? We learn that the word created. Let's unpack this a little bit more. We learn from Genesis 1:1 that the Memra was there in the very beginning, creating. The Word was creating. And John directly ties this to Jesus. There is no doubt about it. All things were made through Him. All things, this Word, who is Jesus, is the one creating. We learn from Psalm 33:6 that this Word, the heavens were made and the earth was made through this word that John directly applies to Jesus. This is not just some God theology like some people like to insist. This is the word, Jesus creating from the beginning.
The Apostle Paul agrees with John and recorded in Colossians, "For in him all things were created, things in heaven and on earth."
And what else did the Word create? Well, we learn in Genesis 1:27 that the Word of the Lord, the Word created who? Created man. And in what? In His likeness. So we were created in the likeness, in the image of God, in the image of the Lord. You can find this, verify this in multiple Targumic sources. But you see here in John 1:4 that John directly applies this to Jesus. He says, "In Him was the life, and the life was the light of men." So you have the light of life within you.
Regarding the biophotonic light within you, even AI gets it. Gemini AI states, "The biophotonic theory is the game changer. It moves the afterlife from a supernatural claim to a subatomic one. If consciousness is a coherent field of light, then death is not an end, but a decoherence event. A transition from a biological container to a non-local field state."
What do we learn from Genesis 3:8? We learn that Adam and Eve heard something. They heard something in the garden. They heard the word. And what was the word doing? It was walking in the garden. We have a walking word here, verified in multiple sources of the Targums, from Neofiti and Pseudo-Jonathan. This Memra of the word was called out, and it was walking. We also learned earlier that the Devar is standing and touching. The Hebrew word Devar is standing and touching, and we have the Memra that's walking. Here again are some variations from Genesis 38 from other Targums. We have the Memra of the Lord is strolling in the garden, and they heard the voice of the word of Adonai Elohim moving in the garden, from various sources. And lo and behold, in Exodus 3, where Moses was present with the Lord, what do we have? We have the Memra. And the Memra of the Lord saw that he turned aside to see, and the Memra called out to Moses. That puts the word right there in Exodus in the burning bush passage with Moses. So the one conversing with Moses was the Memra, the word of the Lord. This walking, this talking, this strolling word was present, a presence with Moses. So he said, God said, because I will be with you, my word will be your support. So God is sending His word, His very personhood. My word will be your support. And backing up to Genesis again, we have the Memra. And the Memra, not only was it present with Moses, the Memra was present with Abram. And the Memra of the Lord was revealed to Abram and said, I am the God. So this Memra says, I am the God. And I will give my covenant between me, my word, my Memra, and you. This is again that covenant relationship with Abraham was invoked and implemented through the Memra, through the word of the Lord. And again, with the covenantal relationship between Abraham and God, in Genesis 17:7, it says, an eternal covenant's being established. and to be in my Memra a God for you. In my Memra a God for you. And I will be for them in my Memra a Redeemer God. So we have a Redeemer God being set up through the Memra, a eternal covenant, a God for you, a Redeemer God. And this is very interesting. Not only do we have the Word walking in the garden with Adam and Eve, we also have the Word in front of Abraham, and we have the Word in the bush with Moses, the Lord. And we also have in Genesis 48, 15, and 16, we have the Memra present in front of Jacob. And it says, the God before my fathers Abraham and Isaac walked. Again, we have a walking Memra. We have the God who has been my shepherd. We have a shepherding word all my life to this day. The angel who has redeemed me. So the angel, again, we have the angel in the burning bush with Moses, which is the word, the Memra, the very presence, the divine presence of God who has redeemed me. We have a Redeemer again. Redeem me from all evil. Bless the boys. So Jacob is invoking the Memra for the blessing of the boys. May the Memra of the Lord who redeemed me. That's who he is calling out to, the Redeemer God that we just learned about a little while ago. Very interesting. We know from the New Covenant scriptures that Jesus shared the glory with the Father. And here we have in Genesis 18, 1 and 4, we have the glory of the Lord was revealed. We have this glory of the Lord being revealed through the Memra. Give thanks to the name. The Memra, the word, has the name. And we know that Jesus professes the very name of God, the name of the Memra of the Lord. And the Memra, the word, was revealed to Abraham. Again, this is recorded in Targum Neofiti. Another interesting revelation in Genesis 18:7. We have the Lord, the Memra, and the Lord said through his word, through his Memra, am I to hide from Abraham? This is a question. Am I to hide from Abraham what's about to go down in Sodom and Gomorrah? And the Lord said in his Memra, I cannot hide from this from Abraham. The Lord said in his word, I cannot hide this. So the one standing with Abram is the Memra, the word of the Lord, the feet of God. And look what we have here. Even the Tanakh agrees that this is a question. And we have many instances of the Lord God, Jesus, conversing with God the Father on things that are about to occur on earth. And in Genesis 18, we learn what it is about to occur. We have, and the Lord, the Memra, said, if I find 50 innocent, I will forgive. And this is related to Sodom and Gomorrah. Again, the Tanakh agrees with this. It is still the Memra here conversing with Abram, saying, I will forgive. So that this Memra, this word of the Lord, has the power to forgive sins here. And it says, and the Lord said, if I find 50 innocent, I will remit and pardon. This is from a different Targum here, which says, I will forgive, or I will remit and pardon their sins. And I mentioned earlier that the glory was with Jesus and the Father from the very beginning. And the Targums agree here, and it says in Genesis 18:7, that the glory of the Shekinah of the Lord went up when it had finished speaking with Abraham. So the glory went up from the one that was present in front of Abraham, which was the Memra. And it says in John 17:5 here, Father, glorify me in your own presence with the glory that I had with you before the world existed. So complete cooperation here between the Targums and John. And in case you didn't see it here, this is still the Memra. This is still the word of the Lord, sharing the glory and writing in the glory. Let's do a quick summary here. What did we pick up on regarding the Memra, the word of the Lord? It was there in the very beginning in Genesis 1:1, just like what John says in his opening of his gospel. And the word created. The word created just like John says in his gospel. The Word created man, just like John says in his gospel. And the Word walked. So again, we have the walking incarnation in John's gospel, but we have the walking Word in front of all the patriarchs. We have it in front of Abraham, we have it in front of Adam, we have it in front of Jacob, we have it in front of Moses. The Word was walking, it was standing, it was touching in Samuel. And we have the Word in Exodus is in the bush. So we don't have anything in the Old Covenant without this Word, this presence, the very divine presence of God, the Memra. Okay, in case you missed it, let's take it back to the very beginning. We have in the beginning, what was in the beginning? Was the Memra, the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. It doesn't say the Word was a God, the Word was the very divine presence of God. And that agrees with Genesis 1:1 and a direct tie to John 1:1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was Jesus. And continuing with our recap, we have the Memra, the Word, the Aramaic word was revealed. So the very first presence of God, the very first revelations of God came through the Memra, the Word, the walking, talking, standing, touching Word that was the covenant maker also. We have the Memra is called a God, not just a God, but the God. And this Word was a Redeemer God that was in the very presence of Abraham and Jacob, called a Redeemer God, redeeming God. Okay, back to Jacob, whose name became Israel. If this is some sort of idolatry, then Jacob himself is the chief idolater because he invokes the angel, the God, the one that walked with him and the fathers in a blessing for his family. And he calls this one, the Memra, the word of the Lord, a shepherd. It was the shepherd of Jacob and all the patriarchs. And there's also the Memra, again, was a redeeming God, again, and the blesser of the family. The word of the Lord was the blesser of the family. The revelation of this word in Genesis 18 is huge. And we have the Memra has the glory. It rides in the glory just like Jesus shared the glory with the Father from the very beginning. The Memra has the very name, the blessed name Yahweh, shares the name with the Father. Okay, the Lord speaks through his Memra. He speaks anytime there's a presence of the Lord. You can't have a presence of the Lord throughout the Old Testament without his Memra, the Word, the very divine presence of God. The Memra it has the power to forgive sins, just like Jesus had the very power to forgive sins. And that is repeated throughout the New Testament, including the first gospel, the very earliest gospel, Mark. You see, Jesus has the power to forgive sins, just like the Memra had the power to forgive sins, and Yahweh, the blessed name, had the power to forgive sins. All three had the power to forgive sins. And the Word has the glory of God. Again, we've been over the glory of God. Jesus shared the glory with God from the very beginning, just like the Memra, the one walking, talking, touching in the very presence with the patriarchs has the glory. All right, don't run off just yet. We got a few more things to cover. We're not going to go over this today, but this is coming up in the future. We're going to look at the timing and history of the Targums and plot them on this timeline. We can see here that these very early creeds that I mentioned earlier, the very early creedal statements were surrounding Jesus from the apostolic fathers. And this Hebrew word Devar and Memra, again, that blows the late progressive development out of the water. I want to read to you quickly from this book here by John Ronning. He summarizes this very nicely. He says, these results support the conclusion that the Logos title, John's Logos title, is based on the Targumic Memra, and that John's adaptation of the word means Yahweh, blessed be the name, Yahweh the Son, the one who is with the Father and shares the divine name. We also learn that he shares the glory with the Father, shares the divine name with him. So I definitely recommend, if you want to do a deep dive study, pick up this book from John Ronning. So what did we learn from this study? We learned from in the scriptures, in the Old Covenant and the New Covenant, there is no interaction with the patriarchs, with the disciples, without this word, this divine word, this Memra. The word was there in the very beginning. The word was with God and the word was God. There is no interaction anywhere in the Bible without the word, the Memra, the Lord Jesus. So you see, when these critics want to spin and frame their narrative of this late progressive development regarding the divinity of Jesus, we can see that they are ignoring the very deep Aramaic translation, the Hebrew word Memra, the very divine presence of God throughout scriptures. And we can see that they choose to ignore how John would apply that theology. We looked mainly at the Memra. We'll look at the Hebrew word Devar later in upcoming videos. We also learned that this incarnate word, this isn't just some a God theology like some of them want to spin. This is the very divine presence of the God, the one that shares the glory with God, that how the Father chooses to reveal himself throughout history through the Son, the incarnate Word, the Word that became flesh and dwelt among us in John 1:1.
Nick, give him your wallet.
What for?
He's got a knife.
And just for fun, let's throw out another Crocodile Dundee reference. Mic Dundee, just like these critical scholars, they try to pull a puny little knife on you.
That's not a knife. That's a knife.
Remember that in Christ Jesus, you have a much bigger knife. You have a much bigger blade. You have the sword. You have the very word, the very mouth of God. All right, if you made it to the end of this video, thank you for watching. Go ahead and hit subscribe and like. That will help combat this late progressive development idea that these critics spin. And if you came to the end of this video and you think I reduced Jesus and you're using this as some justification for making him just some messenger, that is absolutely not what we just presented. You might want to watch it again. It is clearly understood in John's theology that this word was God. It was the very presence of God.
From the beginning with wisdom, the Memra of the Lord created and perfected the heavens and the earth.